Protest movement in this country. I mean, who is the genius who says block major highways in the largest city in Canada and then wonder why people have no more sympathy for you? You know what happened, I'm sure. This is Toronto. I know there are Toronto bashers out there, but come on, the biggest city in this country, on a weekend evening, all the major roads closed down. A couple of thousand Tamil protesters, including, shame on them, mothers with children and men hiding behind them. Now, this is what should have happened. It's called policing. The police go up to them and say, this is illegal, it's criminal, it's wrong, it's dangerous, it's immoral, you're going to be moved, you have 15 seconds, you don't move, we take you away. Children's aid should have been there, the men, if they resist, arrested, the women, if they resist, arrested, the children taken away to be cared for in custody until those parents can prove they are actually fit people to take care of the children. This would have happened with any other community, would it not? I mean, can you imagine if Fathers for Justice had done this? We want our kids back, they would have been beaten off the street, for goodness sake. I was driving to work this morning, the same place. Every day there's a guy there, a policeman. If you're doing 58 in a 50 area, you get the ticket, your insurance goes up. The police are very good at that. Now, I'm not getting individual cops here, but the chief of police, are you a politician or a police officer? The mayor of Toronto, what are you playing at? Are you so terrified of the 250,000 Tamil voters in the city of Toronto? This protest should never have been allowed, never have been tolerated. It's a disgrace and a shame to Canada, its police, its politicians, and most of all to the Tamil population of this country. Michael Coren Show. Join me. Hello, welcome to the Michael Coren Show. It's a Monday. Yeah, the week begins, and I do like weekends. I just, I was busy helping organize that Tamil protest. And let's begin with the Tamil issue. I mentioned in my commentary about what happened here, but it did seem, on every level, to be quite disgraceful. This is, and for those who don't live in Toronto, there's the Gardiner, Don Valley, all the major highways where people are doing 120 were closed down by a couple of thousand people, some of them children who have no ability to object with their mothers. And the police arrested 3 people, finally stopped it after many, many hours. There were people held up for 3-4 hours on their way to hospital, important meetings, trying to get home, work to do, including, as we've learnt today, Tamil people who have said, this is outrageous, how dare these zealots stop the traffic in the way they did.
It's very interesting because the people who are behind the protest presumably want to get some airtime and want to have their case aired.
They got that.
But at this protest and others, I mean, I can never get over the fact that they're waving the Tamil Tiger flag. This is very important because people who support the Tamil Tigers, one assumes, supports their methods. This is the organization that pioneered suicide bombing. They, according to the reports I've read, are responsible for killing more civilians than any other terrorist organization in the world. And they expect Canadians to hold up their hands and say, we stand beside you? I don't think so.
Tamil people, though, rather than Tamil Tigers.
But see, this is the thing. There's the Tamil Tiger flags at these protests, right? So, the issue is they're asking Canadians to side with them, with people holding Tamil Tiger flags. That's not the Canadian way. We don't believe in that. Women are used as suicide bombers by Tamil Tigers. We know that. They strap on the semtech belts and blow themselves up.
Worse about women suicide bombers and men suicide bombers.
What I'm talking about is...
I think, yes, I absolutely do believe so.
No, but child suicide bombers, I understand. Suicide bombers who do not know what they're doing are horrible. But male and female suicide bombers, why on earth would you make a distinction?
Here's why I'd make the distinction. Because what happened is, what was happening is that the Tamil Tiger male suicide bombers were being screened out. And essentially, the Tigers figured, well, if we could use women who are less likely to be targeted, who can get closer to the target and kill more people, all the better for
Well, do you know what happened? At an Israeli checkpoint, it was an apparently pregnant woman who pretended to be ill, and those terribly fascistic Israeli soldiers took her then into the medical area to care for her, and she blew herself up, killing everybody there. No, it's not just like them, but it's just like a suicide bomber.
It was a joke, Michael.
Well.
But no, I'm not saying suicide bombers are great and we should have more of them. I'm saying why make a distinction? It's a horrifying thing to do. Why make a distinction between men and women?
To bring it to our shores, though, Bert, we're talking about the cops not wanting to move these protesters forcefully because there's women and children there. Yet the Tamils have already proven that they're happy to use their women as weapons.
Well, you're talking about the Tamils as if the Tamils were men and women were
ask you about that, though. I know the point you're making may be true, but is it completely so? Is it not something to do with the Tamils having a very organised vote and 2 or 3 ridings in the city of Toronto?
Absolutely.
And also we have a left-wing mayor in Toronto and a chief of police who's a good man in many ways, but he's also very politically correct, who will be... I mean, there were cops in riot gear. What a waste of time and money. Cops in riot gear standing there, and it's not the fault of the individual police officers, not doing anything. They should have immediately called Children's Aid to make sure the children were taken away. I mean, that was child abuse, what was going on.
Children on one bus and then move the protesters out.
Move the children if they did not.
Bring children to protests.
Illegally?
Illegal protests, you mean? Well, if you're... I don't know. Is that any wrong? Is that any more wrong than bringing another sort of protest?
Well, yeah.
We're putting children in danger.
Safety organization.
It's a highway.
Children were not in danger.
Oh,
they were on the highway.
They were on the highway. They were strolling up the Gardner with children in strollers while the cars were still moving.
All the relatives are in much more danger in Sri Lanka.
Come on.
You're sliding away from the point.
No, the point.
Everyone one at a time. Let me ask you the question. Once the police had blocked the roads, the people there were relatively safe. When they initially went onto the highway, there were all terrible accidents could have been caused, by the way. They were simply stopping cars. They had children with them. I do believe that almost any other protest, the police would have intervened. And if the mothers and 2 women were arrested, by the way, would have been violent or resistant, the children would have been taken away into custody for a brief period of time until they could be given back to their parents. Nothing was done for, what, more than 5 hours? Why?
I think I think the main mistake the Tamils made was underestimating how violently people react to being delayed for 2 hours. I think that there's some horrifying stuff going on in Sri Lanka, and it's not all the Tamils. It's the government of Sri Lanka has been mistreating the Tamils in an extraordinary way. The numbers are not believable on either side, either from the Tigers or from the Sri Lankan government, as to who's killing who and how many. I read a column. Amitav Ghosh, who's a writer in India, wrote a piece for The Guardian about a month ago saying that the Sri Lankan government is collecting Tamils, not Tamil Tigers, Tamils, into camps. That's
hardly breaking news, is it?
Well, it's horrifying news, and it looks very much like a lead up to something even more horrifying.
Well, no, hold on. First of all, the radio you're talking about has a very, very historically known agenda.
She's a big activist.
She's writing
Kashmiri separation.
She's writing for The Guardian. She has a certain point of view. There are many others who would argue there are Tamils in the Sri Lankan cabinet. There are Tamils who are completely part of mainstream Sri Lankan society. The Tamils have executed their own people. Tamils who want any form of cooperation.
Americans have executed their own people.
There are many who would argue, well, executing a multiple rapist and murderer is different from executing someone who simply wants peace with the government. There are many who would argue this is not about protecting the Tamils, it's about protecting the leader of the Tamil Tigers. Now, I don't know, because like most of us, I don't really understand Sri Lanka. But as much as the Tamils have suffered, I sometimes question some of the incidents that they report.
The thing is, well, yes, and I think you should, and I think we all should, but I think unfortunately in Sri Lanka we have to question the government as much as we question the Tamil Tigers about their credibility, because they've screwed up their credibility as well. I think, I was looking at the front pages of all the papers that I read online every day, and there's a little wire story in the Boston Globe about what's happening in Sri Lanka, but New York Times, LA Times, Washington Post, not one mention. All the Toronto papers are talking about it. Now, of course, a lot of people are angry what happened, but all of Toronto, and by extension, because the Globe also covered it, all of Canada now knows that this is an issue. And they can decide that it's horrifying. They can decide that the Sri Lankan government should do something, or that the Tamils are being mistreated. But I think they achieved their end, which was to shine a spotlight on something horrifying that's happening in Sri Lanka.